This is St. Louis on the Air from St. Louis Public Radio. I'm Elaine Cha.
It's strange to me sometimes that people want to, quote-unquote, protect kids from hearing different viewpoints. It's not necessarily that we hear an idea and then we just are helpless in the face of it and we go along with it, right? That's human beings are smarter and stronger than that.
Earlier this month, a video of two Missouri elected officials blasting flamethrowers got a lot of attention online. Some assumed they were burning books. As it turned out, Bill Eigel and Nick Schroer, both Republican state senators, were not burning books, but instead boxes meant to represent them. But Eigel explained that the symbolic book burning was more than theater. He posted on X, formerly Twitter, "You bring those woke pornographic books to Missouri schools to try to brainwash our kids, I'll burn those too," on the front lawn of the governor's mansion. It's true, Missouri's efforts to ban books are more than symbolic. A new report from PEN America, released last week, found that Missouri school districts were involved in 333 book ban cases in the last school year. That's only behind Texas and Florida. The new report and the impact of Missouri's efforts to ban books hits hard for people like Lisa Gilbert. Lisa has spent 10 years as a teacher educator. She teaches teachers with a focus on social studies. Lisa Gilbert is a full-time lecturer at Washington University, and she joins us now. Lisa, welcome to St. Louis on the Air.
Thank you so much for having me today, Elaine. It's really an honor to get to be part of this conversation.
And it is a lot of conversation happening, particularly around that flamethrower video that we mentioned in the introduction. Now, what do you make of the message being sent by these two Missouri officials? I mean, are real book burnings something you think about?
Yeah, it's arresting images that come out of those events, right? And I think that's part of the purpose of them, right? This is an organized political effort. And it makes sense that we'd be seeing attention-getting stunts in response.
Mm-hmm. Now, a lot of attention has been on book bans for some time. We've talked about that quite a bit on our show. The explanation that was given by Eigel and Schroer that that this is a kind of policy message. What is it that you make of that?
Yeah, it's on one hand, it's a debate about how do we serve the public good, right? I would say that both our public schools and our public libraries are supposed to serve the public good, right? It's what they're doing when they make a wide range of reading materials available. It's what teachers do when they use culturally responsive and trauma-informed methods to guide young readers through even very difficult and painful content, right? They're fulfilling a mission that's at the heart of a democratic society. The problem is that we're facing threats to our democracy, and we need to be able to say that out loud.
Mm-hmm. Now, let's talk about that report. PEN America released that report last week, and it examined data from the 2022-2023 school year. And book ban cases increased 33% from the previous school year. And that report also found that 3,362 instances of book bans in U.S. public school classrooms and libraries occurred, in that time. Does that increase surprise you, Lisa?
Surprise me? No. I've been following this organized political movement, as I said, for a little while now, and it is part of the strategy for the 2024 election, right? I think that we will see it increase even more in the coming year. Does it surprise me? No. It saddens me, and it worries me. It makes me think about what we can do, you know? Because we do know also that most Americans are against book banning, right? And the danger is that we become complacent, or we risk becoming complacent when we know that we're in the majority. So I would say that there's a few things we can do, right? One is that we do need to speak up, right? We can be the ones who also speak at board meetings. We can be the ones writing letters to the editor. My gosh, yesterday I was in the grocery store and there was somebody that just had a shirt on that said "Read banned books." Mm-hmm. We can do that, right? But I do think we can actually do something simpler as well. At the crux of this debate is a question about whether young people are capable of thinking critically about complicated and difficult subjects.
And
I teach. Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, sure. Go ahead.
Oh, sure. I teach child development, and I can show you the research that shows us that they can do this, but that's not going to be as convincing as stories that we tell each other, friend to friend, family to family, neighbor to neighbor, right? The stories we can tell each other directly in our communities about the young people in our lives, and direct stories of ways that we've seen them rise to the occasion, mm-hmm. right? We can make the case that having books on a shelf is voting for confidence in young people.
Right. Now, the report, I want to talk about the content of the books being banned. And it kind of goes to the point that you've made about children. The report found that overwhelmingly, book bans target books on race or racism, or featuring characters of color, as well as books with LGBTQ plus characters. And this year banned books also include books on physical abuse, health and well-being, and themes of grief and death. And notably, there are these instances of book bans that affect young adult books, middle grade books as well, chapter books, or picture books. And these are specifically written and selected for younger audiences. And I have a son who's just read Because of Winn-Dixie. Mm-hmm. He said that made him very sad. It is about grief. So, the types of books that are being targeted with bans, what does this tell you?
Yeah, the report, I really do recommend that everyone go take a look at this report. It's very, very helpful. They've done a wonderful job with it. The section where they summarize the main reasons for bans, right, or for challenges, there are, maybe 2 or 3 categories in there, right? The number one category was that books are being challenged when content is painful, and specifically when it touches on sexual violence, right? We all want to protect children, but merely restricting access to material that acknowledges the existence of sexual violence isn't going to do that. Mm-hmm. It might even make it more difficult for survivors to recognize their own experiences for what they are. That's the opposite of protecting children.
Yeah.
Right? Sometimes the other category that comes across is, as you were mentioning, themes of identity, right? Themes of different experiences that people can have in society. And there's a wonderful scholar who says, look, books can provide mirrors that we see ourselves. Books can also provide windows that we see into other people's experiences. So they help us to know ourselves. They help us to know each other. And that's part of the power of books. I think that's what also makes us a little bit afraid of them sometimes, right? Because they are so powerful.
Mm-hmm. Missouri ranked 3rd among all states passing book bans, and across 33 districts, PEN America recorded that almost 1,500 book ban cases in Florida, 625 in Texas, and then 333 in Missouri. Is there anything that stands out to you about Missouri in this space or context, especially given that you've had experience teaching elsewhere?
Sure. Missouri has a distinct history within our country, right? Entering the Union on a compromise that was meant to continue a balance between free states and states that would enslave people, a state that itself enslaved, practiced slavery, but yet never joined the Confederacy, in part because of the existence of St. Louis and the existence of a large number of German immigrants across the state, who felt very strongly that secession was the wrong thing to do, right? We've always had a kind of almost role within the country that means that these kinds of controversies will play out on our soil in particularly strong ways.
We're going to take a quick break here, but we'll be back shortly to continue this conversation. This is St. Louis on the Air on St. Louis Public Radio.
Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association, saluting Earth Day on April 22nd with an ongoing commitment to help offset carbon emissions with sustainable harvesting of Missouri forests. Details at choosewood.com.
Welcome back. Lisa, before the break, you were talking about Missouri's very particular history, and you've worked with teachers who are working on becoming better teachers or future teachers, and you've taught inside a classroom in a St. Louis high school. Now, have book bans made that mission, what it is you do and why you do it, harder for you now in Missouri?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And this is an issue that we need to put in the context of Missouri's difficulties with teacher recruitment and retention, right? Right now, in my role at Washington University, I'm very fortunate to get to work with potential teachers every day. Some of them are people who know that they want to be teachers, right? They are in our certification program. They are working towards certification and eventual careers in public education. Some of them are people who care a lot about education, enough to take classes in it, right? But they are not sure what they want to do after school, right? And they go through this process of discernment, of deciding if teaching is something that is going to appeal to them, right? A lot of them are initially drawn to it, and they would make such fantastic teachers, Elaine, like they would. But they look at this environment, right, where there is this drumbeat of distrust in teachers. And they ask themselves, do I want that to be my professional reality day in and day out?
Right.
Some of them do decide to pursue it, graduate, and get, certified. They teach for a few years. And then depending on how that goes, right, some of them leave the profession absolutely heartbroken, right? We lose good teachers in Missouri when folks drawn to education conclude that the place that they can make a difference is going to be somewhere other than a classroom because the politics around that space are just too fraught. And this is what the research on burnout tells us too. We could double teacher salaries overnight. And look, I think we should, right? But it still would not solve Missouri's problems with teacher recruitment and retention. It's a bigger cultural issue.
Yeah. And there are teachers who are choosing not to stay in Missouri that are going over to other states, right? So, you have taught a lot of teachers, so you have expertise when it comes to social studies in particular. What are some techniques you have for teachers working with controversy, with difficult subjects?
Sure. I think to start with, it's just the fundamentals of good teaching, right? We need to build a classroom community. We need to know that we are all honored, respected members of our class community, that we care for each other, that goes from student to student as well as from teacher to student, right? What are the things that we do when we're not even talking about controversial topics yet, right? What are the things that we do to create that atmosphere of trust inside of our classroom? First and foremost, right? That's going to be step number one. That is so foundational to good teaching, I think. The second thing is when we do approach those topics, right? And schools have to approach those topics, right? Schools are supposed to be laboratories of democracy, right? They're supposed to be places where we can encounter a wide range of viewpoints, and in so doing, strengthen our own. It's strange to me sometimes that people want to, quote unquote, protect kids from hearing different viewpoints, because it's oftentimes, iron strengthens iron. And when kids can hear other perspectives, just like when adults hear other perspectives, right? We are able to refine our ideas, articulate our ideas, know what it is that we believe. It's not necessarily that we hear an idea and then we just are helpless in the face of it and we go along with it, right? That's human beings are smarter and stronger than that, right? Yeah. So understanding, okay, we have this atmosphere of trust in our classroom is number one. Number two, we understand why it is that we're having this conversation. And maybe that's, the teacher helping the students understand, here's why we are talking about this. Maybe it's also, how do I as a teacher build relationships with the parents in my classroom, right? How do I understand that the school I work in is part of a community, and that my role as a teacher is to be a part of that community, to serve that community, but also to be a part of it, right? And so we set all of that groundwork. And then after that, there are, specific strategies, specific kinds of discussion protocols that are designed to help people practice listening skills, to help people practice articulating their ideas, to help people compare and contrast, right? And at the end of the day, after we've done all of that, it's so essential in social studies education that we are helping students say, okay, now that I've looked at all of this, who do I want to be in the world?
Mm-hmm. Well, the world also includes people who are not, they're not maybe on the same side that you are insofar as books being available. In St. Charles, in fact, several parents decided that a public library board remove 2 books that were not from a school library. Again, they were from a public library. The 2 books are It's Perfectly Normal, a children's book that explains puberty and sex, and then the book Bang Like a Porn Star, which is in the library's adult section. So, when you are looking at parents who have very strong feelings about what should and should not be available, even in theory, to their children, what kind of advice do you give to these future teachers and ones who are continuing their education about how to deal with that in a productive way?
Sure. It's so important to honor all the families in our classrooms, to honor all the parents, to start asking, ourselves, okay, so I have a different perspective, but, what other kinds of life experiences, what other kinds of beliefs could I have that could help, that could, lead me to have a different perspective on any issue, right? This one included. And understanding that we do have this shared humanity on all sides of an issue. I know that sounds like a little bit of rose-colored glasses, but I think that that's really the foundational step that we all need to take when we try to talk with each other about controversial issues, right? Because if I go into it thinking I just want to have a debate, I just want to win, I'm not going to be effective in building bridges with the parents in my room, right? So specific to teachers, right? Like that maybe is general, right? But specific to teachers, right? We need to approach each interaction from an understanding that all parents love their children. All parents want the best for their children. And we all need to be together on the side of the child.
Mm-hmm. And in this last 30 seconds or so, what's your best hope for what happens with these book bans?
Man, give me the hard question now, right? I hope that we can connect with each other and we can come to a place where we can understand what James Baldwin told us back in 1963 in this beautiful piece that I ask our future teachers to read every fall, right? Called A Talk to Teachers. I recommend it to everyone. Mm-hmm. But he says, in it, he says, the purpose of education is to create in a person the ability to look at the world for himself, to ask questions of the universe, and then learn to live with those questions is the way that he achieves his own identity. Mm-hmm. That we could understand that education is about children in process, They're not finished products. And by the way, neither are we.
Yes, that's true.
And our society is in process. It's not finished yet either.
Lisa Gilbert has spent a decade as a teacher-educator, teaching teachers here in St. Louis. She's currently a full-time instructor at Washington University. Lisa, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
This episode was produced by Danny Wissentowski.
Audio engineering and podcast design by Aaron Dorr.
Our executive producer is Alex Hoyer.
St. Louis on the Air is a production of St. Louis Public Radio. Understanding starts here.
St. Louis on the Air proudly supports local artists by using music from Life Creative Group.
Do you find yourself regularly listening to episodes of St. Louis on the Air? Suggest us to a friend you think might enjoy our conversations, and leave us a review and rating on Apple Podcasts on the App Store. It's the simplest way to help people discover our show. Thank you.
St. Louis Public Radio is a member-supported service of the University of Missouri St. Louis.
Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association, saluting Earth Day on April 22nd with an ongoing commitment to help offset carbon emissions with sustainable harvesting of Missouri forests. Details at choosewood.com.